Hello, welcome back to my channel. My name is Mary. Really, I'm gonna tip my hat to booktubers because when you're finishing a couple full-length novels a week, it's really a challenge to sit back and reflect and pull together your thoughts in a coherent manner, reflecting on those reads. I'm going to attempt to do that today for my April reads, and I was able to finish 7 full-length novels and 2 shorter pieces, which I'll throw at the end. I will put timestamps below. I have a quick run to the library because these have actually gone through their automatic renewals, so it is time to sit down and do this thing. Okay, so first I thought I would go over the full list of books. I'll insert that footage here. I'm just going to go over chronologically what I was able to finish reading. Starting in April, I finished off early in the month Donna Tartt's The Secret History. Then a little popcorn read, The Woman in the Window by A.J. Finn. Ninth House, Leigh Bardugo. 1,000 Ships by Natalie Haynes. This was an Audible short called Randomize by Andy Weir. Lincoln and the Bardo by George Saunders. A Monster Calls by Patrick Ness. Klara and the Sun by Kazuo Ishiguro. Wrapped up the month with another short volume, The Sleeper and the Spindle by Neil Gaiman. 2 of the books I got from the library are DNFs for me for now. Unearth Were Briefly Gorgeous I will likely finish as a May read. I don't have very much left. It's just a book that I need to parse out in small bites. It's devastating. It's about mothers and children and the generational effects of war and trauma on that nature-nurture kind of relationship. Devastatingly beautiful, I think I said that. Devastatingly beautiful writer, Ocean Vuong. I will read everything he writes that I can get my hands on. It's gorgeous. Sadly a DNF, and I just really have to, right now these are costing me money, so I need to get that back to the book drop tomorrow before work. My other DNF is George Saunders' A Swim in a Pond in the Rain. George Saunders teaches in the creative writing department at Syracuse University, and this book is kind of a hybrid course of a creative writing course he teaches there with Russian short stories that serve as mentor texts. So this is right up my alley. I love Russian writers. I love creative writing. I love writing workshops. I teach writing. I've published before in little tiny ways. So this remains on my list. Right now we're headed towards the end of our academic semester and I teach full time. I just didn't want to come home and jump right into another class, especially since there's so much professional development that I'm committed to over the summer. So that gets shelved just for now. I will certainly dip into that. So let's rank these things in order of number 7, my least favorite read of April, all the way up to number 1. And number 1 was really, really tricky. Perhaps if you ask me on any given day, those 2 might swap positions. Readings like that, it's, who said it's like stepping into a river, and every time you open a book, it's a new river, and you're a new person. I feel like that's an apt metaphor. Position number 7 would have to be my beach read, The Woman in the Window. A teacher friend of mine at work loaned it to me. I brought it home and read it in a day. It was popcorn read. It was suspenseful, fun, but by a little over halfway I sort of had figured out what was going to happen, and in a plot-based novel, it's all over at that point. I did not feel that the characterization was anything earth-shattering, remarkable. It's about a woman who suffers from severe agoraphobia, does not leave her apartment, lost her husband and young child, and she's sort of dealing with those peripheral things at the same time, heavily influenced by The Rear Window by Hitchcock. So I thought it was a little bit derivative. I didn't think it really rewrote anything in an earth-shattering way, but it was a fun popcorn read, so I did finish it. Coming in at number 6 is A Secret History by Donna Tartt. I have spoken about this in another video, which I'll link up here in the cards if you're interested in more thoughts on this book, but I would say it comes in at number 6 because it just is too wallowing in its genre. So this is Dark Academia. This is about a group of super bright students in a classics program at a college seemingly modeled after Donna Tartt's own experience at Bennington. The parts that I found most interesting was the incorporation of the classical elements of the myth of Dionysus and these young students as they open their minds to new ideas and new mythologies. However, it is so self-referential and far longer than it needs to be. And really, about halfway through, I had a hard time finishing it. I set it down for about 6 months, maybe even a year or two, and decided to just get it off my list and commit and finish the thing. So I listened to the rest of the novel on Audible, cranked up to 1.5 speed. And honestly, I feel that about a third of the way through the book, when the protagonist really sort of starts to become acclimated to the program, each of the 5 or 6 students in that core group of friends really are indistinguishable from one another. None of the characters show any kind of growth. None of the characters show any kind of transformation. They all just succumb to their Dionysian experiment and experience. Now, Donna Tartt is rather brilliant at turning one character's arc into just an explosive multi-plot that goes toward the criminal and sort of the deterioration of the mind. But I enjoyed her moving those themes around in The Goldfinch much more than I enjoyed them in The Secret History. So solid number 6. Oh, I should give these stars too. 3 stars. There was some promise. Maybe 2 stars. There were points of this novel where it just felt like sticking forks in my eyes to make it end. Anyhow, so maybe 2 stars on that one. In 5th position is A Monster Calls by Patrick Ness. I thought this was a magical book, mostly dealing with one child as he deals with the very serious illness of his mother. That anxiety and his tensions and his working through this issue manifests in the form of an old yew tree outside his home, engaging with him, pulling him into his world, the yew tree's world. His task is to tell the young boy 3 stories, and at the end of that ritual, the boy has to tell the monster his story. So it's a magical concept. It's beautifully illustrated. It is a young adult book, which is why it doesn't rank higher on this list. So I would give this 4 stars, very nicely done. If you know any young people who are going through grief or trauma or dealing with a family member's illness, I would highly, highly recommend this. Number 4 is, I don't have a physical copy of this book, so I'll insert some images, 1,000 Ships. For this read, I'm referring to my notes. I really enjoy the premise of this book. This is a story told of the Trojan War from the perspective of all of the women involved. So this is from the perspective of female goddesses and mortals who were touched by that tale. There were some real shining moments. Clytemnestra and Cassandra stand out in my mind. If you're interested in mythology and interested in the female characters, I would recommend this with one caveat. Hanging out in the family room with my sick doggy. Right after finishing the novel, my notes were that it was an anticlimactic ending regarding Penelope's story, which only exposes her as a vessel for her children, for her situation, and for her husband, Odysseus. I think that criticism's fairly valid. I do recommend you read the afterword if you're interested in mythology. The author actually has a BBC podcast. In the back of the novel, she gives sources for each of her sections, so she's weaving together Ovid and Euripides and, of course, Homer. Although I think one of her claims is that the Greeks really didn't write women, but I don't see how you can draw from Euripides and make that claim, because I think he writes Oedipus the King, I think in that trilogy, I think he writes women quite compellingly and powerfully. All right, that's my little 2 cents there. My doggy has a hurt leg. We just can't figure out what's wrong with him. That's the normal size. And then his left leg is just really, really swollen. It says, stop sharing my shit on the internet, mommy. And I feel like this was just a lost opportunity. Heckabee and her vision seer daughters are super interesting. Again, just a little bit too heavy-handed with stating explicitly that these stories were important because they were told from the perspective of the women. And I gave this one 3 stars because there were, again, some moments that really shined, but it's highly unlikely I would read it a second time. It feels like I'm hitting all these with 3 stars. I might reassess at the end. Third position, Ninth House. I did enjoy this. I thought that Leigh Bardugo, this came out in 2019. I was really captivated by the ghosts in the audience of some of the scenes. The premise of the story is that it's set in some of the secret societies at Yale, which of course we also refer to as New Haven. And each of those individual houses has sort of a supernatural flair, something that they're a supernatural skill that they are especially gifted. It uses a lot of familiar tropes, at least familiar to me with some of the fantasy that I've read this year, such as doors between different worlds. And I gave this 3.5 stars. Again, I thought the characterization of the main character, the magic system with the ghosts and the portrayal of the ghosts is really excellently done. 3.5 stars for that. I suppose if I'm going to read a series, I want to read them all consecutively. I know this sounds really whiny, and I have all the respect in the world for authors, but I've been waiting so long for the Gollum and the Ginny second book to come out. That's Helen Wecker, by the way. Absolutely adored that first one, but it's like, honestly, it's a long wait between books, and I know that I'll have to reread the first before I read the second book in the series, just to refamiliarize myself and touch on the magic systems. Number 2 position is Klara and the Sun by Kazuo Ishiguro, and I'm a pretty big fan of his work. Ishiguro wrote one of my favorite dystopian novels, Never Let Me Go. The premise of Klara and the Sun is set in the future, and it begins in a little shop in Japan where basically AI dolls are moved around the store and waiting to be adopted by their perfect child, the child who will be their perfect companion. And there are a lot of interesting tensions that arise around artificial intelligence and what is life and what is intelligence, and at what point, if any, does artificial intelligence surpass human intelligence. This walks right up to that question without crossing over it. And Ishiguro is such a subtle master of characterization. So Klara is basically the artificial intelligent doll, and she is not the most current model. A mysterious girl in a taxi cab pulls up to the store, and then long passages of time pass. Again, Ishiguro, master of time. All of that time spent in the shop, you're learning Klara's special insights and her capabilities, and that's just beautifully handled. And wow, as I talk about it, I want to nudge it up into number 1 position, but I will refrain. Okay, so in the end this will be a spoiler-free review. I do recommend the novel. I recommend, if it takes you some time to get into a story, to give Ishiguro a chance. He's utterly masterful and a craftsman, so he deserves the time it takes to break into the story, to merge with the story, because once you do, I find that it is a very solid connection between reader and story. Number 1 is Lincoln and the Bardo. Now, again, another story set in a graveyard, told from the point of view of disembodied voices of ghosts. The young Willie Lincoln, who of course died of a fever, basically while the country was immersed in the Civil War. And it's just beautifully, beautifully done. Beautiful world building and concept of the afterlife, devastating and horrible at the same time. And just so profoundly human if you can get through the multiple voices and the disconnect and the true stream of conscious writing style. I would recommend parsing it out, reading it sometimes on paper or Kindle, and listening to other scenes. There's an excellent dramatized version on Audible that I will link below. Not affiliate. I am a teeny weeny YouTuber and just really starting my booktube channel. So, I hope you enjoyed those recommendations. Oh, I did mention 2 shorts. One was Randomize. Now, this is an Audible short, so it's available only on Audible Book, but they are free if you're an Audible member. I'm not sure how long Audible will have it up, but there's an excellent sci-fi series put together that includes authors like Amor Towles and Anthony Weir. I hope I'm getting his first name correct. It might be Andrew. Anthony, Andrew, who are you? I made a poem. Randomize. Andy Weir, Hero at the Martian. Randomize is about basically a heist in the casinos in Vegas. It's a digital heist, and the characterization, again, is brilliant. Truly brilliant. Really adored it. Completely plausible, and if you like thrillers and suspense stories, I would highly recommend it. And the second short was a Neil Gaiman retelling of Snow White, and it's called The Sleeper and the Spindle. If you're interested in feminist retellings of fairy tales, which often are just gruesomely patriarchal, I would highly recommend you look up a copy of that. It's a short read. It's very atmospheric, much more atmospheric than character driven, but does some interesting things to the trope of pricking your finger, of poison, of being asleep for hundreds of years. It's just chef's kiss superb. That wraps up my April rankings. I hope you enjoyed the video. Let me know what you thought of any of these reads. If you've read them, comment below. If not, thank you for your time, and in a couple weeks I should have my May read on time at the end of the month. Thanks for joining me. Ciao.